You're listening to Blue Radio, bringing the vibe.
Right here, right now, from the port city of Mombasa. And right about now, if you're touching base with us, thank you for choosing us one more time. I want to remind you of our main conversation today. This morning, it's all about carbon credits. It's all about conservation, rather. I do have my brother in the building, Donald, an expert in policy, an expert in conservation, climate change, and the whole bit. Now, I had time to prepare for this interview, and I went to the depths of it. I want to start off by talking about there's something I was reading, voluntary carbon markets, and I don't know something else. What is the difference between these two fields? Because somebody who could be listening to us, najui tofauti ni nini. There is voluntary carbon markets, and I don't know there is another type of carbon markets. What is the difference, between the two?
As the word sounds voluntary, what does the word voluntary mean to you?
You are willing to do it by yourself.
Thank you. And then we have the compliance.
Okay.
Compliance means you are required to meet certain criteria or certain threshold or certain laws. So we have the voluntary carbon market, which engages people who are not driven or are not bound, are not mandated by any law to reduce their carbon footprint, and they go into it driven by their consciousness about their carbon footprint and their consciousness to reduce, to mitigate global warming and climate change. So we have different players. We have corporates. We have individuals. We have even some blue chip organizations, Microsoft, Amazon, and sort of who are actively who have projects, supporting projects in the voluntary carbon markets. And for the compliance market, this I think one of the most common compliance market is the EU emission trading scheme, and that it allows a certain use of certain carbon credits to a particular level, to be able to offset or to be able to reduce carbon emissions that a company or a country, or sorry, not a country, a company or an entity.
Yeah.
It allows an entity or a company to use carbon credits to a particular threshold to be able to offset emissions that they cannot reduce.
No.
So just for the compliance markets, these are usually backed by laws, policies, and requirements. And lack of compliance, there are penalties that will be incurred as such. So there is a particular quality or brand of carbon credits, for lack of a better word, that are eligible for the compliance markets. And most of the carbon credits in the voluntary carbon market are not eligible for the compliance market.
Now, you've talked about, the likes of Microsoft, Netflix. These are some of the entities, who are, of course, operating, or rather have been given that access, to offset, or rather bought credits, across Africa. And from some data, wanasema ya kwamba 3/4 of carbon offsets in 2022 took place in developing countries such as Kenya. And one of the things that is emerging is that many of these entities are, of course, getting those credits from Africa. Does that not create fear, in us, or rather many African countries and the people, that, if these companies come and, let's say, quote unquote, buy the credits, are they not buying the land from the Africans?
Well, there have been issues about forced displacement.
Okay.
And there have been papers written about it. And there have been also papers written to defend it. There was one paper that has been written around the mangroves in I think in the Rufiji Delta.
Okay.
Is it in Tanzania? So people, the local communities complaining of being pushed out to create space for a carbon offset project. But there was a paper also written to address that particular claim. So, in as much as there are two sides of the story, but the reality is that there is a risk when the legislations and regulations are weak for people to be exploited. And as you see, we've seen one of the recently enacted regulation, the carbon markets regulation, the Kenyan government regulations, late last year, that the Climate Change Act. So you see, it comes in with certain regulations that requiring a certain benefit sharing percentage, requiring certain documents or agreements to be requiring certain documents or certain agreements before certain projects are certified and verified or registered by the government. So those are some of the protection mechanisms or protective mechanisms that the government or most governments around in Africa. Also, Tanzania has a carbon regulations
Framework,
framework. I think also Zambia has a similar setup. So, in as much as there is the opportunity is there in the global south, because the getting carbon credit in the global south is quite affordable as compared to nesting a carbon credit program in the global north.
Okay.
Because if you look at the cost of land in Africa or the cost of land in Europe, you look at, let me just put a rough figure, but it's usually very high and very expensive or very different. We would say, for example, 1 hectare would, say, let's give it an abstract value, let's say 10,000 USDs annually. And let's say an equal hectare in, let's say, Norway or somewhere in the global north will be, let's say, an abstract figure 5 times that. So
wow.
if you put that into perspective, so the opportunity cost is very high for that in the global north. So the opportunity cost is quite low in the global south. So that's why there is a preference for that. Yeah.
Right, interesting. I want to jump into something very interesting. You know, when it comes to financing of these projects, especially in Africa, it seems there is, I don't know, is it hesitance or is it a challenge? Especially, you know, when we go to these COPs and these meetings, we see a lot of African countries lobbying, you know, for more grants, for more credits to come into Africa, but there is that challenge. Why is it that, you know, when it comes to such conversations, it's becoming harder, especially, you know, when it comes to the conversation bit? Why is it there is little fruit to bear when it comes to, you know, issuing of grants, especially to African countries?
See, that's that has been one of the main challenges about climate action. There is too much talk and very little, or very few people commit, or very little effort or little impactful action is done. Because at the end of the day, the question goes, who is supposed to bear for the costs of the climate crisis right now? You know, the African negotiator will say, we are not responsible for it. We need to be compensated.
Okay.
We need to be compensated appropriately, not just some little money. We need to have, if it's resources, they have to be tangible enough to help us not just in the mitigation, but also in the adaptation in terms of coping for those negative effects that have been caused by the climate change or the emissions. You see, if you look at the development model for the global north or the developed country has been a fossil fuel development model. And global warming or climate change is largely attributed to the fossil fuel emissions. So now the global south will argue we have not used fossil fuel as much as you have. So we should be compensated for your pollution. So now, see, now that's where the stalemate comes in. And be like, you need to, it has to be historical. It has to be historical to be able to now be impactful, be able to address those historical injustices that have been done to the global south. And also the global south wants to develop. We want to develop to a level where we are almost at par with the global north. And the argument is for us to also develop, we need to exploit our fossil fuel resources. But I say, no, you should
shouldn't.
not. You should not. You should not do that. There's that. Okay, for example, there was a conversation about stranding all fossil fuels, and I think was it Saudi Arabia, or I don't know which country came up. Okay, fine. This is the cost of us not mining our oil resources, and now we have given you. Tell us not to exploit oil. Fine. Then the question is, who is going to pay for that? Who is going to get money out of their own coffers and now
And finances, yeah.
I read a paper. I can't remember exactly the location, but it could be Ecuador or Peru. They had discovered that they had this sort of they had an area of critical biodiversity, and beneath that area, that reserve, there was a lot of fossil fuel. So they came up with a framework. They organized themselves, and then they'll be like, okay, fine, we have this much oil beneath this area of importance, biodiversity, conservation, species, all that packet. So now this is what we require for us not to explore the oil beneath this. So it's a dilemma. You know, okay, fine, they have done all the groundwork, but the person now, or the people to now bring in those resources to incentivize them not to exploit that oil. Nobody is moving. And I think one of the enabling frameworks is the carbon finance framework. Okay, fine. This is a threatened ecosystem. These are the levels of degradation, and this is the projected loss. So we are going to incentivize you or pay you not to cut those trees at that particular rate. And we are going to monitor annually based on the projected loss. And we are going to account for that. And we calculate the carbon that has not been released based on you wavering your right to exploit. So that's where now the carbon financing framework comes in. It pays you not to do harm. But also the most critical question is, does it pay you enough?
That's a good question.
Now, that's also another bit that has been in the works, in the discussion, in most global conversations. What do we use to quantify or to estimate or to value our natural resources, or our natural carbon sink? Do we use the social cost of carbon? Because the social cost of carbon, integrates a lot of things. The laws of, aesthetic value, or cultural, not just the carbon that is stored in the trees, or the value of the trees that the tree would have been cut. Because that tree also brings rain, that tree also brings honey, that tree also is a shrine. So the question is, are you valuing that tree from all those goods and services that the tree gives to people, or are you valuing that tree just for the carbon and the timber or the wood that would have been used? So if you value it for the wood and timber only, it will give you a lower value. But if you value it for the other, the myriad and the holistic benefit of the tree and the forest, it will give you a higher value for the forest.
What you've talked about is very interesting. Yeah. So let's say somebody has a piece of land in Kenya right now, and maybe let's say 1 hectare, and they decide, I want to tap into this opportunity, and they go all out. They decide to plant trees. How can they now, move from the point of these trees have been in this land, let's say for 10 years, 15 years, to them now getting to a point where they can make money from it? Because carbon credit is right now becoming the hottest. It's like attracting everybody. If somebody has land, they're thinking, let me plant trees. How can they transition from this phase to this phase? Or somebody maybe alikuwa shapanda kitambo, zishakoma, miti zimekoma, anataka kukata mbao, afanye vitu vingine, lakini anaambiwa don't do it, there is this opportunity. How can they tap into that?
Now you see, if you look at this, the top carbon standards in the voluntary carbon markets, the costs of mounting a carbon project may not be may not be permissive for small scale farmers.
Okay.
Oh yes, that's one. And two, it's a highly technical space.
Okay.
That's the reality.
Uh-huh.
So you need technical skills and experience to be able to craft those documents, do those assessments. So one, there's the financial implication, and then there's the cost implication.
Okay.
And then three, also, now with the new policies left, right, and center, there's also that process of getting government policies approval registered and all that. And that is not a cheap process. But what is also coming into the space is we have innovations that are making it possible for those small landholders to be able to reap carbon credits from those small plots of land with very minimum development costs.
Okay.
Yeah. So previously, the top standards, the VCS, the gold standards, the CDM, the costs have been very, very high for small scale holders to even mount a carbon project. So right now, there is so much, and what a farmer or what an interested person would do, even before putting down a carbon credit, they should be able to have at least document the process. One, you should be able to have some verifiable document on on the thought of generating carbon credit from that particular setup. And one important bit is that particular activity should go beyond the business as usual scenario, in the sense that it should be motivated by carbon finance, just repeating what I said earlier, and also it should not be mandated by law, because we have some areas that are required to be planted, and we also have, based on your, let's say, development plans or something, you had already conceptualized that this particular strip of land is going to be a woodlot for timber. So for argument's sakes and for practicality, carbon credits was not in your thought process as you began the project. What you were doing was a timber plantation or commercial timber plantation. Now, there are several criteria to determine eligibility of a farmer. One, that is, it has to be additional, that is, go beyond business as usual scenario. It has to be compliant. It has to be legal to the country's regulations.
Okay.
Yeah. And also, you have to be able to at least demonstrate that you're leading to biodiversity conservation. And most carbon credit standards move away from exclusively commercial trees or commercial tree farming, because it has brought a lot of issues.
Okay.
Because now they argue, what is your motivation? Was it timber? And then you saw, I could make money from
this.
carbon.
Yeah.
Because you see, for example, improved forestry management. This is mostly done in the global north. We have expansive plantations, and with a regular harvesting cycle, let's say at year 35. So when the trees say get to year 35, a project developer or plantation owner may decide, I'm not going to harvest at 35. I'm going to harvest at 40 or 45. And then these 10 years, I'm going to credit them. I'm going to seek carbon credits. There was a methodology, I think, that allows carbon crediting from extension of the rotation period.
Okay.
But now a question, it raises questions. Is it carbon credits that actually motivated you, or is it during that time the market was so bad that your wood could not fetch much? So you realized, I'm actually not going to make much.
So you
decided to extend the harvesting period
to maybe later, so that you can fetch better profits,
better wood prices, and also gain from carbon,
from the credits.
But also it also brings in questions of permanence. Well, you've harvested trees, or you've planted trees. You've credited them for 30, 40 years, and then you cut them down, and then you use you bring your timber to the market, and then whoever buys it in the market goes and uses it for fuel. It burns the carbon, releases it back into the atmosphere. You go back
to square one again.
Yeah, to square one. So another quality of such projects, or a requirement, that is your activities must demonstrate a level of permanence. Yes, it must be able to guarantee that the carbon you have removed or sequestered or absorbed in your trees will stay in the wood carbon sink for a particular period of time. And if it doesn't, then your carbon credit qualities are low, and they don't actually contribute to much climate value, because you literally sucking carbon from the atmosphere and then releasing it back
again. When projects do come in a community, do the community members know what these things are? Are they aware of the benefits? Are they aware of the challenges? And more importantly, of why these projects are coming to their communities? Case in point, I don't know, is it Mikoko Yetu, or there's this project, I think it's in Lamu, is it Lamu or somewhere? I don't remember, but it's a very, very huge carbon credits project. I know you are part of it. You remind me, I've actually forgotten. But when you went to the community, did you educate them on the credits, why it's important, and how they can develop, the project, not only now, but for the future?
A few years back, the conversation had not picked traction. But right now, carbon finance is a popular thing, and with the likes of Mikoko Pamoja, which is a pioneer program globally, being in the South Coast, I was an intern. Mikoko Pamoja.
Okay.
And after Mikoko Pamoja hit the waves, the communities around the coast were really keen to get into the space as well. But as you said, the challenge was them understanding the dynamics and what goes into that whole process and how to go about it. But I can confidently say, from my recent encounters and exposure, that the community are quite enlightened when it comes to the mangrove issues, mangrove uses, mangrove sustainable exploitation. And I think in the South Coast we have about 3 carbon projects. I've been part of 2 and observed the third one from a close range as it was taking off.
Okay.
I've been part of Mikoko Pamoja, and it was upscaled to Vanga, which is called, I think, if I could remember very well, Blue Forest. And I've been on several activities for both Mikoko Pamoja and Blue Forest, and engaged the community at length. And there is another project around Ramisi Funzi Seascape.
Okay.
It's called Vilinda, or Paparico, sorry. So it's also it's a reforestation, and I think conservation, wetland restoration or something, that sort of a project. So we have around 3 say carbon projects. In the North Coast, I have not heard, or I have not read on the top, the leading carbon standards of any registered carbon projects in the Northern Coast.
Okay.
That is, I could be wrong, but I haven't heard any news that any project has been registered in Lamu or Malindi or Kilifi, such. Because one, I think Lamu already, we know that it's an area of conservation interest. We have the Kiunga Marine Reserve, which has very beautiful mangroves, very beautiful mangroves. And we also have a lot of, it's exposed to a lot of deforestation and degradation. But I was in Lamu, I think 3 or 4 months ago, for a training sponsored by or coordinated by the Nature Conservancy and the Northern Rangeland Trust in Faza. And one thing I could tell is there is growth and there is a lot of understanding of the carbon space, and communities are actually actively engaging in that. First, I was in Faza in 2018, had a very small plantation. I came back this year, the plantation is grown.
Okay.
So, and I engaged with the community members that were there in 2018. Some of them were green, they knew, so not green, but their knowledge of the carbon market was not as extensive as what I got to hear when I got back there in 2024. So the communities are, I'd say, they're actually sensitized. Now the challenge is now stimulating that funding or the resources to also develop those carbon projects. And also the other challenge is mangroves are government forests. There are also bureaucracies involved in that. So we have bureaucracies, we have funding, and we have technical skills. It's still a space that requires a lot of technical writing, technical analysis. And of course, most of the communities do not have that high-level technical expertise. They depend on external support and consultants. So there is that aspect as well. And it will take a while, I'd say, for, say, communities to be able to develop their in-house capacities. I see a model example is Mikoko Pamoja. It has coordinators who are sourced from the community. Some of them who have university education, who understand the workings of the carbon space and the carbon project. And it is reassuring to have one of your own who understands the project scientifically and who understands your way of life, being part of that particular project. I've seen it with Mikoko Pamoja, which shows that that space is evolving towards now equipping this project with in-house and local capacity. And we see people from the local communities getting advanced knowledge and training in that space. And I believe in the next couple of years, we'll find more indigenous people with high-level technical skills in that particular craft, I'd say. So it's a matter of time. It's blooming, and sooner or later you'll find it's going to be flooded as any other industry. All right. As
We conclude, I see time is not on our side.
Yeah.
What is something, somebody who is stumbling across this on this concept today? What is something they should move forward with, especially young people? There are those who will be maybe joining university, who would want to get into the conservation space, who would maybe, want to learn more about credits and carbon and whatnot. What is that one thing you'd want, them to learn about it, or something for them to put their emphasis on?
That's a tough one. So right now, the market is evolving rapidly, very fast. And from my perspective, I'd say the traditional or indigenous conservation approach has matured. Now it's a conservation for economic development, conservation for sustainability. And one gap that is emerging even from the carbon space is the integration of technology in conservation, the digital monitoring and verification, real time. Now that's an opportunity. That's a niche. A conservation practitioner who is just joining university can exploit. And the earlier you get in, the better, because the earlier you get in, before the field is flooded, you already have carved a niche out yourself somewhere in some corner where you are the guy to go to when they need us. We need problems sorted out in that particular space. So I think digital monitoring and verification, from where I stand, and link it with conservation for purpose, whether it's biodiversity, whether it's carbon credits, but that bit is, I think, where the money is going to be.
All right, interesting. There you have it. I know it's been short. But very interesting. As you conclude, maybe somebody, you know, has not been paying attention to everything you've been talking about, the nitty-gritties, the financing or whatnot. Labda hajekuwa akipay attention. What is one thing you'd want somebody to walk away with from this conversation? What is that one thing they should take home with them?
It all starts with you. Whether we are developing these ambitious programs, whether it's they are highly efficient, high integrity, but at the end of the day, it all begins with you. You lower your carbon footprints, you lower your wastage. That's where the impact is.
Okay.
And remember that these are financial instruments, these are financing frameworks. They tend to have an end time. So, you know, the idea is for it to be sustainable. So the key is behavioral change.
Okay.
It all begins with you. Behavioral change is what the carbon financing frameworks are trying to incentivize. You shifting from wastefulness to being very conservative in your usage of natural capital, being less wasteful, being less destructive, and being mindful of the future generation, intergenerational equity, so they call it.
All right. As we conclude, there is one term you told me off air. It's quote unquote being paid to sin. Maybe we could also define it for our listeners what that means in terms of carbon credits and that conservation space.
I told you that's how some of the skeptics look at carbon credits, because the idea of carbon credits is offsetting an emission. An emission is more or less like a negative impact of a production process. So to offset it, literally, you continue to emit, but you get somebody else, or you pay somebody else to reduce your footprint or your impact while you're not doing the reduction yourself. So some skeptics look at it as being paid. You're paying. You pay to allow yourself to continue doing the negative practices.
Hence the term
polluting. Yeah, but for people who are optimists and pragmatic, we look at the use of carbon credits as a necessary tool and framework to unlock funding to stimulate horizontal development of other economies in the society, to enable adaptation, not just mitigation.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Donald, for making the time.